I'm Ed Bacon. I'm the rector of this place, and I want to welcome you. We had 3 climate scientists lined up to come and speak about Paris, and they all fell through. And so we decided maybe there's a message in that. So I appreciate your coming together, and let me just share a little bit of personal stuff. If we have time, I think we have a little clip to tease you into this afternoon's gathering at 2:30. I'll be there. We're going to show Naomi Klein's wonderful documentary about, do we have something queued up? So let's kind of hold on and see how that works. For those of you who are visiting with us, we welcome you. We're glad to have you. If you would like to be on our mailing list, please, please, please fill out the green sheets at the clipboards at this table. Today, our action, I should say theologically, that here at All Saints Church, we don't believe that our worship is complete until we take action. You can have lip service, but you got to have life service. So we try to walk the walk, and today we're walking the walk about gun violence. And we're trying to federalize universal background checks for all. And don't take solace in our having some rather progressive gun restriction laws here in California. We need to tighten them up, and also we need to make sure that the entire country is doing that. So we have a vigil tonight to observe the 3rd anniversary of the Sandy Hook shootings, and we've had horrible, horrible gun violence ever since, and that's kind of what's drawing us to this moment. So I wanted to share a little bit about my own personal journey and the journey of my extended family around what happened in San Bernardino, and then make a few points about how I think it's all interconnected, having to do with the culture of fear and politics of fear that is absolutely grasping at the heart and the soul of not only the United States, but the entire globe. But I want to ground it in talking about my cousin Shannon Johnson, who was killed in San Bernardino. I didn't know Shannon, although his mother and I and his uncle all were in class together, going through high school, along with 3 of my first cousins. And we were kind of a clan and loved one another. And our family is known for its kind of side-splitting playfulness and kind of really off-the-wall, sometimes inappropriate affection and physical affection. They are all Baptist. In the South, there's a phrase, bless his heart, and that's always used for someone who embarrasses the family. And so my name is Edwin, bless his heart, because I was ordained a Southern Baptist preacher and then had the audacity or wisdom or whatever, or probably both, or craziness, weirdness, to leave all that and become an Episcopal priest. So Barbara, Shannon's mother, called Hope, my wife, last Sunday and said, I want to know if Edwin, my name is Edwin there, will come and preach the funeral. And we had been out of touch with one another. And so I was very happy to go. This first kind of point I want to make is my deepening learning about gun violence, that some of us who are maybe several concentric circles removed from the actual personal effects and impact sometimes may lose touch with the fact of what this does to disorder a family's life and what has to come into play to try to find some sense of meaning and some beginning journey of healing. It's certainly complicated by the fact that in Barbara, my cousin's life, she lost her 29-year-old husband to an industrial accident where he was literally trying to save the life of a coworker. He weighed 160 pounds and his coworker weighed 210 pounds, and he was at the bottom of a toxic chemical silo, and he went down and held his breath and tried and came back up to get one more gasp to hold his breath to go down into that toxicity. And he picked up the man, and then as they were on their way up, they both fell to their death. A 10-year-old son and an 8-year-old son and a 29-year-old widow. And so her life has been a lot about putting that together, and so has Shannon's life. Has been about putting that together. And he spent many hours spending the night at his father's grave, and his ashes will be there, buried there, next to his father in Jesup, J-E-S-U-P, my hometown. Just a few words about the redemptive part of Shannon's life that I feel at liberty. I don't feel at liberty to share everything, but I feel at liberty to share this because he not only was heroic in that moment of saving Denise Peraza's life. And Denise was at the funeral yesterday, and I got to meet her and her husband. It was really a beautiful kind of harmony that Shannon's spirit set up and a ripple effect. But the heroism, I think, was taking place in the last 9 months of his life. He had had 2 failed marriages. He was about to be engaged to this wonderful human being named Mandy Pfeiffer, who is a volunteer with Mayor Garcetti's office to go and enter any kind of tragedy that happens in the city of Los Angeles. Gang violence, domestic problems, something like this. And I very much wanted to meet her and to talk with her in preparation for this trip. And the way the world is connected and interconnected, we live in such a web of mutuality. I reached out to Rich Llewellyn, a former senior warden here, an active member, and he works in Eric Garcetti's office, and asked him if he could connect me to Mandy, and he did it just in a second. So I was able to last Tuesday morning to spend 2 hours with her in Koreatown, where she and Shannon lived across the hall from one another, to find out what had been going on in his life. And then that night, I was able to meet with his second wife in a restaurant in Long Beach and find out about that. I just want to describe what I consider to be an exemplary spiritual struggle. David Brooks had this wonderful article 2 weeks ago in the New York Times about recovering from trauma and what a struggle it is. But it's not an impossibility, particularly if you have a strong bedrock of love in your life, and even if you didn't, you can get that in your life. And that if you understand the power of story, a power of narrative, that book 1 for us all is our life before tragedy or trauma. And book 2 is those moments that absolutely put us into disequilibrium and explode all of our markers for sanity and reality. And then he said, for all of us, there's an option of book 3, where we take and not deny the horrible things that have happened to us or to others, and weave them into a coherent narrative, a story that takes us forward. Now, my cousin Shannon was doing that. He literally was an urban monk. Not sexually, but spiritually. He had spent 10 years driving trucks, and that's how he got out of South Georgia and explored this country and found himself drawn to Southern California, in fact, to San Bernardino. He lived in a cabin out in the woods in Statesboro, Georgia, where he could blast his music, great heavy rock metal aficionado, and not have complaints, and spend time alone in solitude. And the truck driving years allowed him to do that as well. He liked to say that there are 2 kinds of truck drivers, philosophers and the others. And he was clearly a philosopher. After his second divorce, someone, and we haven't learned who yet, introduced him to a book I've now purchased and reading by a Hindu holy man. The name of it is I Am That. And the point of the book is that all of us are I am. That is our true self. Interestingly enough, that's who Jesus says he is. And that as soon as we discover the I am in our lives and say, I am that, then we have the power, the internal, holy, sacred dynamism, dynamite, which is the Greek word for power, dunamis, to begin to clear out all the things that need to be cleared out so that we can do what the I am is calling us to do. You can imagine that trauma when he was 8 had its effect on fracturing the family. His mother remarried, had another child, and all of them have had a challenge to stay together and be together. But Shannon had with meticulous care, put framed photographs of all his family members, those who were talking and those who weren't, and put them on his wall with really, really great order. And then he walked into the Atomic Tattoo Parlor, which I think I'm going to visit before I leave. And under the careful artistry of Sean, Eric, and Mauricio, he developed a program to have a full body tattoo. He started with a floral sleeve of all the beautiful flowers and the fauna of South Georgia. And then absolutely everybody in his life, he wanted to somehow reconcile, integrate, bring into wholeness. He loved Los Angeles. He loved to tell South Georgia stories. He loved our sayings like, I want to hug your neck. Come here, give me some sugar. Y'all play pretty now. Lord, have mercy. In fact, he was about to have Lord, have mercy tattooed on himself. In English and in Spanish, because he loved his hyphenization, his hybridity of being a South Georgia person who lived in Koreatown. So he was going to have Lord have mercy and Dios ten piedad, both tattooed on him. He had tattooed on his body John 15:13, because that's what is on his father's tombstone. No greater love has a person than to lay down the life for a friend. He was a student of friendship. He was committed to being a friend. He was committed to call out the best in everybody. He was called the preacher sometimes because he had such earnestness, and earnestness is a big word in this Hindu book that he was studying, saying to Muslims or Jews, atheists, he didn't care. Just be the best Muslim you can be. Be the best Jew you can be. Be the best atheist you can be. He had absolutely a bottomless well of curiosity about life. All the while he was being very playful. He always wanted to integrate his Los Angeles self and his South Georgia self. So I had this wonderful, long conversations with Mauricio and Eric, who were there at the funeral. And I won't tell you one of the great things that happened, because that's a spoiler alert for the sermon, so you have to come and get that story in the sermon. But I fell in love with Mauricio and Eric, and they got to tell me about the program, and they sent me photographs of Shannon's body, and which his mother really does not want us to share, and I honor that. However, he was so playful that he wanted to have as many combinations of Los Angeles and East LA and Los Angeles on his body that he had Mauricio tattoo on his body Vivian Lee, who was, for those of you who are too young to know, was the star of Gone with the Wind. But he had Mauricio put a sombrero on her. He decided as a result of reading this book over and over and over again. I asked if I could please be entrusted with a copy of the book. And Mandy, his fiance, rolled her eyes and said, "Ed, he read it on an iPad." But as a result of reading that over and over and over again, a point is made to clear up your life of everything that gets in the way of your being your true self, of being the I am, of being I am in the world. So he sold his TV. He would spend a lot of time in the dark and solitude. He loved to walk everywhere. So he'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to take the subway train to San Bernardino from Koreatown. And then he kept his car at the San Bernardino station so he could drive on and be on time. So I believe he had moved into the house of love, and he has become such a national figure, and I just wanted my own. I can't tell you all how much I longed to be with you and how much I longed to have you all in that Baptist church yesterday. Y'all would have gotten happy with those Baptists. And I wanted to tell you about it. One final thing. He truly engaged with great respect the man who turned out to be his assailant. He wanted to know as much about Islam as possible. And he knew that Islam is a religion of peace. I learned that from Dr. Hassan Hathout and Dr. Maher Hathout, and I'm so honored that and they co-founded the Muslim Public Affairs Council. I'm so honored that Dr. Ebba Hathout, Dr. Hassan Hathout's daughter, is with us today. Thank you and welcome. Glad you're here. So I think that Shannon has unleashed the energy of the House of Love into the world. And we could feel it in that room. I think we're going to feel it for a long time. His last words were, "I gotcha." He said it to Denise Peraza. And there's a movement that's going to start called the I Gotcha. And it's going to be for the kind of spiritual maturity and love and compassion that was his. I came back from Jessup with a great deal of hope, I must say. I think that there's an awful lot of fear throughout the southern states. In 1964, when Lyndon Johnson signed the Voter Rights Act, the historians tell us that people who couldn't abide that, and Thomas Merton tells us that if people are committed to the city of death and are complicit in the ways of the city of death, they are going to fight like mad to keep their power. And so, according to the political historians, there were groups of people who got together in smoke-filled back rooms and said, we have got to reverse the Voting Rights Act. And the way we'll do it is to develop a new story of white supremacy, a story of our needing to create and maintain our power. Tim Wise, who will be with us on January 30 and 31 to teach us about how to change the story about that kind of power, said that the thing that we have failed to do is to offer an alternative story. We have absolutely failed our job to create a new story of interdependence, of interconnectivity, of compassion, of love and forgiveness, of the fact that we are all one. Tim Wise goes on to say in this amazing book, what is it, Susan? Something like affluence, the danger of affluence or something like that. It'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, Tim says in his book that, we frequently are absolutely astonished that we made such great strides of progress about women's equality and racial equality and justice, and on and on and on. Now to be fighting the regressive steps in those areas. And he says that Under the Affluence is a great book. And in the closing chapter, he says, we will have to continue to fight regression until we get really serious about a narrative that we can spread throughout our country. And now The Economist magazine that I saw last night in the Atlanta Airport magazine stand that feature on the cover a pen and ink drawing of Marie Le Pen, the Prime Minister of Hungary, and Donald Trump, saying that this is a global phenomenon of playing with fear and stirring up people's fear. And then until we get our narrative together and repeat it, I love Dr. King's work, and I think I've read everything he wrote, and he never ended a speech without telling his narrative that good will prevail over evil, and that we are interconnected, and that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. He had that interconnectivity down, that we've got to do that. So on Saturday night, last Saturday night, not last night, I went over and spoke and prayed at the Muslim Public Affairs annual meeting in Long Beach. And we were doing a little fundraising. They needed $150,000 more. And we were like $145,000. And I said, I think that about 1,000 people in the banquet room, I think we can exceed that. And it came to me all of a sudden, if y'all exceed this by 10 or 15 or $50,000, I actually think this room can go to $200,000. I'm going to ask the leaders of the Muslim Public Affairs Council to let me organize an annual banquet in Birmingham, Alabama when I move to Alabama, so that we can have an impact meeting. And we'll have 50 people the first year, and then 100 people the next year, and 200 people the next year. So I'm kind of developing a missionary zeal, oriented energy vocation about my life in Alabama. And I think that rather than call myself going into retirement, I'm going to call myself going into my missionary field. My mother-in-law was so upset when I became an Episcopal priest, and when I refused to come back in the Baptist fold, she would explain, Edwin, bless his heart kind of thing, she would explain, well, we're loaning him to the Episcopalians to be a missionary to them. And we often talk about living in the All Saints diaspora, that people come in here and spend years and get transformed. It's a transformational journey. And then we go out and are in the diaspora. I'm going to be in the All Saints diaspora, and I'm going to be a missionary. Now, let me try to connect some dots. My heart, I'm so glad about last night's accord in Paris. 189 countries signing on. Bill McKibben says it gives us a framework. President Obama said it gives us a framework. It's not going to solve everything, but it gets us moving. But as I read that New York Times article last night on my iPad, on the plane, it just broke my heart that they couldn't put certain things in it because John Kerry knew that if they tried to put that in, that the U.S. Congress would slap it down. No way in hell those things were going to be in because of so many climate crisis deniers who actually hold elected public office in the Senate and the Congress. The one of the core values of Confederate consciousness and white supremacy is they are coming to get our power. It's a they, them, and us mentality. It's a dualistic mentality, which, by the way, my cousin Shannon, this book is about non-duality, non-dualism, that we're all one. There's no either or, there's always a both and. There's not an us and them, we're all in this boat together. And that the same kind of energies that deny climate crisis, which is unenlightened self-interest. It's not even a self-interest. I don't understand it. It is, it just doesn't make sense because this means the destruction of poor people first and all of us afterwards. There's no, the science is there. But the same kind of thinking, which is not thinking, it's reactivity, because it's down in the earlier brain we have, the reptilian brain, where you can't think, because that part of your brain only does flight or fight cerebration. It's not until you calm down your fear so that the blood can get up here into this part of your brain that you can begin to think and then innovate and create. The same kind of stuff that's going on there is fueling our gun crisis. I had so many conversations with relatives, and some would tell me, Edwin, I wouldn't touch a gun. And others said, I pack a gun everywhere I go. And it's about fear. I am afraid that they're going to get me. And they is really amorphous. And you just kind of fit in any other. The issues of race, on and on. And I think it would be good to cue up and show just 2 or 3 minutes of this film. But I want to say this. Proximity is the answer. Brian Stevenson, who I hope will be here on Martin Luther King Sunday, we're still negotiating with him, but the last time he was here, he said, the opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice. And we have to become proximate with people who are different from us, particularly poor people. So the undertaker and I had a little conversation after Shannon's funeral yesterday afternoon. And she told me that there is a small, embryonic Muslim community in Jessup, Georgia. And they had reached out in love to my cousin Barbara. My brother, who's a Baptist preacher in Atlanta, sent me a link to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution article about how, and it listed, there are 25 different mosques in Atlanta. And they'd got together and raised $100,000 just for relief for the victims of the San Bernardino shooting to reach out. There are people like you and me all over the world who have the house of love working in their hearts, bringing joy. And we are to join hands with them and pay more attention to them than we do to the fear mongers. We need to tell the media, cool it on Trump. Let's hear from some other people. There's some other people who are wise and have something to say. So I want you all to come back this afternoon at 2:30. And we're just for 2 or 3 minutes, because of my travel, I haven't previewed, and I just asked my brothers and sisters on the sound team of All Saints Church to cue up this, and let's just watch just 2 or 3 minutes of this, and then we'll wrap this up, okay? Thank you.
Can I be honest with you? I've always kind of hated films about climate change. What is it about those vanishing glaciers and desperate polar bears that makes me want to click away? Is it really possible to be bored by the end of the world? It's not that I don't care what happens to polar bears. It's just that we're told that the cause isn't out there, it's in us. It's human nature. We're innately greedy and short-sighted. And if that's true, there is no hope. But when I finally stopped looking away, traveled into the heart of the crisis, met people on the front lines, I discovered so much of what I thought I knew was wrong. And I began to wonder, what if human nature isn't the problem? What if even greenhouse gases aren't the problem? What if the real problem is a story, one we've been telling ourselves for 400 years?
That's it, the story. My God, I didn't even know that was going to be up there. It's about the story we tell ourselves. It's not about us. Not about greenhouse gases. It's about what story. So I hope that you will come back at 2:30 this afternoon. I'm going to be here. We're going to watch this thing together. We're going to have some smart people who know stuff. I don't know stuff. And we're going to talk about this. And obviously, always is the call to action. Pardon? So, yes, one question. Joel, do you know if it's going to be streamed this afternoon? I don't think it's going to be streamed, is it, Joel? No, it's not going to be streamed. I'm so sorry. Yes, please. Will it be what? Will it be copied? We will stream the discussion online, and we will work on getting this movie to everybody, because it is certainly a breakthrough documentary. Naomi Klein. Yes. There's the answer. January 12th, it'll be released, and that'll be on our website, and we will make sure. But we're seeing it before everybody else, not to speak competitively or anything. But you can have a leg up on everybody else by coming this afternoon. Any other comments or questions? So my last word is to ask for your prayers. Pray for my family. Pray for the family of every victim, not only of this horrible gun shooting, but every family is a victim of gun violence. Needless to say, they live with that for all their lives. And, I forgot this in my sermon. I've got to unfind it and underline it. But I read yesterday that J.K. Rowling was saying this, that Brother Plutarch said that it really matters what you do inside yourself, because that has an impact on all of your external environment. Don't ever, ever, ever think that you're doing your own personal work to clear away everything that's false and needs to be burned up, to make space for your truth, your true self, and that's a lifelong journey. Don't ever believe that doesn't matter. Don't ever outsource that to somebody else. Oh, Desmond Tutu's going to do that for me. No. Desmond Tutu, if he were here, he would yell and scream, and he said, without us, God will not. And without God, we cannot. But it's got to be a collaborative job to save the planet, to save the human race, turn the human race into the family, and get everybody to move into the house of love. So that's what it means to show up at this place, where we try to preach the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other, be audaciously, nonpartisanly political, and to call people into action as a way of rounding out their faith. See you this afternoon at 2:30. Thank you very much.